What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Lumiose Post, where we talk about all things Pokemon, and today we're going to be talking about some very interesting regional variants, and that is the regional variants that were given to Articuno, Moltres, and Zapdos. There's a lot of, I guess, speculation and theories on these variants that they could maybe not even be variants, and we're going to get into all that, break them down, talk about, you know, what really, I guess, makes these Pokemon tick and makes them so special. So, first off, they're special because, I mean, they're the only legendary Pokemon that have regional variants. There's no regional variants of Suicune, Entei, Raikou. There's only Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres, which is, you know, really, really cool. But it is leading to a lot of confusion because in their dex entries, it talks about how they got their name, specifically for the Galarian forms. It talks about how Galarian Zapdos got its name because when it rubs its wings together, it like makes a crackling of like a cackling is laughter, crackling of electricity, like that kind of sound. And the Pokedex implies, oh, when this Pokemon rubs its wings together, it makes a crackling sound, and that's why we call it Zapdos. And so that's very strange. They refer to these Pokemon as new Pokemon. They refer to them as, you know, Pokemon that got their own names, and like there's other like bits and pieces that led a lot of people to go, okay, well, you know, now that we're looking back at them in Gen 9, we have these convergent Pokemons in Gen 9. We have Tentacool has now gotten a convergent form with Toedscool, and Diglett has gotten one with Wiglet. And revisiting what we're told about Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres, could they maybe be convergent forms and not regional variants at all? Well, I would say no, and we're going to get into why I would say no. So, first off, you know, we do have the fact that if you look at convergent forms, they're drastic changes. I've done a couple of videos where I've touched on this, but I'll say it once again. Look at Diglett. Diglett has an Alolan form, and it has a convergent. Its Alolan form, Alolan Diglett, is a mole. So Diglett, a mole Pokemon, gets a variant that makes it another type of mole. But its convergent form is an eel, which is a type of fish. So Diglett goes from being a mole to a fish. That's what makes that Wiglet a convergent evolution and not a form. Because, no, you have, with regional variants, it's environmental pressures will change the Pokemon, but no environmental pressure is going to change a mole into a fish. That's just not going to happen. And they even kind of touch on that with Dugtrio, or Wugtrio, excuse me, dex entry, where it says that it was actually at one point considered a Paldean form of Dugtrio. But obviously this was corrected, likely because when classifying these regional variants, people started to discover, hey, you know what, if you look at Vulpix, you know, Cantonian Vulpix and Alolan Vulpix, they're both canids, they're both, you know, these, not even that, they're both, you know, Vulpines, I think is what they're called, foxes, you know, but here we have a mole and a fish. That's, you know, this is, they can't be related. Wiglet's more closely related to Huntail. So, no, it can't be related to Diglett, right? And that's the thing here. So, you have to look at that with the birds. Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres are birds. Galarian Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres are still birds. Different kinds of birds, but still birds. Also, you know, just from a mechanic standpoint, you also have to look at the fact that the convergent forms we have change their types completely, so they do not share a type with the original. Wiglet doesn't share a type with Diglett. Toedscool doesn't share a type with Tentacool, excuse me. But these regional variants do. They all share the flying type. Galarian Moltres still has the flying type from Moltres. Galarian Articuno, the flying type from Articuno. Galarian Zapdos, the flying type from Zapdos. So it's very likely not a convergent evolution. I think the things that we're seeing that, you know, are implying that they could not be variants, I think that there's two ways to explain that. The real world explanation of that, like the, you know, take our head out of the Pokemon world for a second and we are real people who just play Pokemon, it's because convergence weren't a thing yet, and so Pokemon kind of was just playing around with regional variants and, you know, gave an explanation for it that doesn't really hold up later on. Now, in the Pokemon world, an easy way to explain that is they're doing with Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres the exact same thing they did with Dugtrio. They are assuming that Wugtrio is a regional variant of Dugtrio, so they started to assume Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres were convergence. Once they found out that Wugtrio was actually a separate mon, they thought, well, you know, those birds could be separate Pokemon too. You know, it's misinformation, and it's very understandable misinformation, because while Wugtrio can be found on like every beach in Paldea, the Galarian birds can only be found in Galar and really stay just around the Crown Tundra for the most part. You know, of course, Galarian Moltres is shown to fly off to the Isle of Armor, and Galarian Zapdos is shown to run off to the wild area in, you know, like the mainland Galar. But we do still see that they are primarily located in the Crown Tundra. Furthermore, they are legendary Pokemon. Even though they're regional variants, they're still legendary Pokemon. So yeah, they're a lot more elusive. So it's easy for Pokemon to kind of come up with these things that they don't have explanations for them for. So that brings us to this whole thing of how they got their names and what's so confusing about this. You know, by saying Galarian Zapdos got its name through this, this, and this, it implies one of two things: that Galarian Zapdos is a separate Pokemon from Zapdos that happened to also be named Zapdos, or that Galarian Zapdos came first. Now, I don't think it is that. I think that, you know, what they're saying about Galarian Zapdos and Galarian Moltres, they actually don't have an explainer for Articuno's name. They just say it is called Articuno. They did not, like, say it's called Articuno because of this, like they did with Moltres and Zapdos. But with Moltres and Zapdos, the explanations they give could really apply to both Pokemon. So they might just be, you know, kind of giving it a dex entry that's really about its Cantonian form. But, again, it's an elusive Pokemon, so there's not much data on it. So, yeah, they just kind of had to go with, this is how the Pokemon got its name. So, you know, again, with Galarian Zapdos, it talks about how it rubs its wings together, and that creates a, like, crackling of electricity sound. That would also apply to Zapdos. It even talks about how when Cantonian Zapdos rubs its wings together, it will, you know, actually make some lightning. So this is just left over from Cantonian Zapdos. And, you know, that it makes sense that that's just them saying this is how the Pokemon, both forms, got their name. You know, this is why we know it's a Zapdos, really. Then with Galarian Moltres, we see that it says that, like, the blazing aura around it that looks like flames is what made them come up with the name Moltres. Well, again, you can apply this to Cantonian Moltres. It, too, has a blazing aura of flames on it. Now, the key difference here, though, is they say it looks like flames versus it is flames. So, you know, that's kind of the distinction between Galarian and Cantonian Moltres. But either way, I think that, you know, it's pretty clear that just, you know, that's kind of, to me, that is just them saying this is how we know this is a Moltres. You know, is because it has that same flaming appearance as Cantonian Moltres. And again, you have to kind of give them some leg room, really, because cannot stress this enough. These are legendary Pokemon. There's not a lot of data on them. So yeah, they can't exactly give thorough dex descriptions and thorough information on these Pokemon. Now, last thing I'm going to talk about here is which of these came first, and I do firmly believe it is Zapdos, Articuno, and Moltres. And the reason why is when you look at variation like this, oftentimes the variant, the newer one, will have traits of its original, but, you know, not really vice versa. So, looking at the Cantonian Moltres and the Galarian Moltres line, you see that Cantonian Moltres is on fire. It's fire flying. This translates into, with Galarian Moltres, one, getting a move that kind of involves fire and, you know, is very similar in that sense, but also is a move that, or is a Pokemon that looks like it is on fire. But you see what I mean? It looks more like Galarian Moltres has some leftover traits from Moltres than Moltres does Galarian Moltres. You know what I mean? And same thing for Articuno and Zapdos. They both have traits that seem to be left over from the Cantonian forms, but the Cantonians don't really have any traits that seem to be left over from the Galarian. It certainly is more in number from Kanto to Galarian. So that is why I firmly believe Cantonian, Moltres, Zapdos, and Articuno are indeed the originals on here. But yeah, be sure to let me know what you think of this, what you think of these Galarian birds and Cantonian birds. Which one do you prefer, the Cantonians or the Galarians? Because I love Cantonian Articuno, and it is my favorite of all 6 of these, I think. But as a whole, Galarian is definitely better in my opinion. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss all of our future videos where we, talk about just weird things in Pokemon, try to explain it, do theories, do just things talking about the franchise and features of the franchise in general and the Pokemon in it. All that fun stuff we do here, so you don't want to miss that. So again, like, subscribe, and hit the bell. And until next time, I will see all of you later.